Hey everyone, how you doing? I hope you guys had a great Independence Day and 4th of July weekend. I am Rob in the Abyss, and it's 1995, and we still have a pretty good stack for 95. Not as many as there's been the last couple of years, but still a pretty good amount of movies to talk about. Some classics, and then some ones that maybe once again you guys haven't heard of or haven't seen, etc. So to start off 1995, we're gonna go with the Brady Bunch movie. Now, realize, first and foremost, when I'm doing these videos, remember, we are talking about acting. We are talking about our craft. We're talking about our job as actors, right? Yeah, I want you guys to discover movies, and I want you to find things that you haven't seen or watch movies that you've thought about watching that you haven't gotten around to, and now this kind of inspires you to do so. The Brady Bunch movie is marginal. However, I wanted to point out Gary Cole as Mr. Brady and Shelley Long as Mrs. Brady. They do a phenomenal job making you feel like you're watching the originals from the TV show without acting it. They're doing themselves, they're doing their job, but they make you believe that they are, Mr. and Mrs. Brady. The kids, other than Christine Taylor, who does a really good Marcia, the kids are marginal. Michael McKean as the neighbor, he does a great job. But, like I said, it's a marginal film, but I wanted to point out that when you are playing characters, we talk about characters and what is a character. Well, you can make up a character in your head, or you can make up a character and live it, right? The problem when you make it up in your head is you end up trying to act that character. But when it's made up and you make it your own, you end up living it. You live that character, and that's what Gary Cole and Shelley Long does, and that's what they do in this film, and that's why I wanted to point it out. Next up, another comedy. Once again, I know people love this movie. It's funny. It's got its moments. It's typical Spade Farley type humor. But for me, once again, I want to point out Rob Lowe, who we talked about with Wayne's World, really understanding that comedic timing and stuff. He's got some great comic chops, and he's funny as hell in this. And then Brian Denny, who plays Tommy Boy's dad, terrific actor. And so once again, you can take the goofball humor, but surround it with good actors in Rob Lowe and Brian Dennehy, and it really makes, the cohesiveness of the movie. You see that when they did, the other Farley movie, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but, you have Tim Matheson in that one, playing his brother, and you pair him up with another really good actor, and that's what they do with this kind of comedy. Once again, Rob Lowe and Brian Dennehy really do a great job in this. Next one I want to talk about is, a really, really good comedy. I think it's funny. Randy Quaid is really, really good in this. Paul Reiser does a good job. Matthew Modine. Amy Brenneman does, amazing job as the love interest. The ex-wife of Matthew Modine, but the love interest of Paul Reiser. And basically it's about these families who are coping with divorce and their time with their kids. And then all the stuff that goes on. And it does have some really good moments, capped off by, of course, Randy Quaid going to dinner with his blind date, and it's a disaster. And then he ends up crashing the Rob Reiner's radio show, and that's hysterical to end the movie. But there's a lot of good stuff, and it's one of those ones that I talk about flying under the radar, and Bye Bye Love definitely does that. Next up, we're going to talk about another one that kind of flies under the radar. Renee Zellweger, Liv Tyler, and a bunch of others in a movie called Empire Records. A good movie, but once again, why I like it is it reminds me of the days of the record store, going into the record store, shopping, looking for that specialty, the people that work there and how they are. And this is really the story of all these people who work at this record store, and money goes missing from the store, and they're trying to figure out what happened to it, and the manager, who is really good to these kids, is trying to protect them and do the kind of stuff that he needs to do without also losing his job. And it makes a good, fun little movie, good comedy, and it's basically in a record store, which is kind of cool. It takes me back to the 70s and 80s when I used to go shopping, and that's why I like this one a lot. Next in line, we'll go with Apollo 13. Of course, it's a true story. You got Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, Gary Sinise. It's just, Ed Harris, really, really well acted. It's an unbelievable story. But to be able to make this work on film, it comes down to the actors in it, and they all do a really nice job. And most of us have seen it. We know it's really good. But, I had to, put it on this list. Another true story, To Die For, Nicole Kidman, Joaquin Phoenix, Matt Dillon. She's a teacher who seduces one of her students, played by Joaquin, and she kind of influences him into killing her husband, which he does with a couple friends, and then it's the whole court thing, etc. Blah 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 blah. And this is the the story of that true story. She is really good, seductive with Joaquin. He's young, and to see him in those early roles is kind of neat. And then once again, I'm a huge fan of Matt Dillon. He does a really good job in this as well. It's a good kind of thriller kind of thing. So check it out. I don't know if you guys have heard of it or even seen it, but you need to check it out. The Quick and the Dead, and it's funny. I always liked this movie because of Gene Hackman. He's one of my favorite actors. And the more I watch it, the more it grows on me. I don't think Sharon Stone necessarily is the greatest in the world. She doesn't kill the film, however. A young Leonardo does a good job. Russell Crowe does a good job. But, I mean, it really is about, Gene Hackman. And, once again, like we talked about with The Unforgiven, he's so good and he's so believable that even though he's my favorite, you're rooting for all the other ones against him. That's how believable he is. It's not an easy job to be a likable actor and not likable on screen at the same time. That's a gift. You have to be really truthful in your work, and he does an amazing job with that in this movie. And like I said, as I've watched it more, it's growing on me. He's just so good, and they all do a good job supporting him in it. And it's a good it's a good Western. It's basically surrounded by gunfights, but once again, it goes down to the acting for us and believability and doing your job as an actor, and there's nobody better than Gene Hackman. I mean, he's right up there. All right, next one I want to point out, another Michael Douglas film, a little different than the ones we've been talking about. The American President. He is President of the United States. Annette Bening. She becomes the love interest, and he has to deal with the fact that he has a girlfriend as the President of the United States. Once again, a really, really good cast surrounding him. Michael J. Fox, Martin Sheen, David Paymer, and then, his political rivals, Richard Dreyfuss. So once again, a very, very powerful cast, a good story, and another really solid Michael Douglas movie. Next in line, I didn't talk about Grumpy Old Men the other day, and the reason I didn't is I actually prefer Grumpier Old Men. You get, Anne Margaret back, you get Walter Matthau, Jack Lemmon, Burgess Meredith, of course, is the crazy, dad of Jack Lemmon, and then you had Sophia Loren, and this one to me is funnier than the original. The original's great, but I think this one is really, really funny. The banter's unbelievable, and Burgess Meredith's one-liners are off the charts. You could go through a line in the history of film of Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau films, The Odd Couple, The Front Page, just to name a couple off the top of my head. And, then you put them in this as they're older, and it's just really just like an extension of all these films they've done through the years. So you could just Google movies they've been together and just start and go, because they're so good together. Their chemistry and their relationship is very, very strong, and they're great. And it's really, put it with an exclamation point in this. All right, another, we talked about Die Hard. We didn't talk about Die Hard 2. I really like Die Hard with a vengeance, and I think a lot of it has to do with, once again, Samuel Jackson being in this, and their banter back and forth, is really, really strong. And then, you add the story and him chasing, basically these clues through the streets of New York, and it's a really, really good action adventure thriller. It's in line because after this they really start to fall off, in my opinion. The last couple were not good, but I really enjoyed this one. And then you add Jeremy Irons, who's a really good actor, as the villain, and he's also, I'm sorry, spoiler, it's 1995 film, so you've had time, as the brother of the original villain in Die Hard, and you put that whole plot and twist together, and it makes for a really fun film. All right, next on line here, or in line, is Mel Gibson in Braveheart. We talked about it in the epics. We all know it. It is an epic film, Academy Award winner, really, really strong. Talking about the Scottish Klansmen, etc., freedom, all that stuff. Once again, if you want more in depth about this, go to my epics segment and you'll see it. But most have seen this movie, most love it. It's a really good, strong film, and so we don't need to go too in depth about it, but it definitely needs to be in the top of 1995. All right, Casino. De Niro, Pesci at their finest. Not as good as Goodfellas, of course, but pretty good. Another true story about how Vegas was built and how the casinos did their thing and the laundering of money and how the mob came in and all of the stories. And it's a typical Scorsese film. You got the narration, you got the conversation, you have the good acting. Sharon Stone's best film, in my opinion. She's really, really good. To me, this is number one for her. Basic Instinct is two. Another classic, film of Scorsese's at this period of time, and it's a can't miss. Another De Niro film for 95, I actually like better than Casino, is Heat. De Niro, of course. Val Kilmer, amazing in this, very different than his other roles leading into this. And then Amy Brenneman again, we just talked about her in Bye Bye Love interest in this. She does a phenomenal job. And then you got Al Pacino. And this is the first time that Al Pacino and De Niro were in a movie together where they're supposed to work together. Unlike Godfather 2, where they filmed separately because De Niro was filming the early years and then Pacino was filming the later years. This was, supposed to be them together. Well, yes, they are together in the movie, but they don't film together until later on with Righteous Kill. So even though they're in this movie together, they still, even in the scenes they did together, did not film together. So kind of crazy, but a lot of continuity. The restaurant scene is filmed at the original Bob's Big Boy up off of Riverside in North Hollywood, right up by the North Hollywood Workshop, which is kind of cool because when you go in there, they have pictures by the booth of where they sat, and you can kind of see, once again, a film set, which is kind of neat. And there's a lot of them in L.A., and you get to see the one from Heat. Next up, another favorite actor of mine, Christopher Walken. The Prophecy. He plays the Archangel Gabriel coming down to Earth to find a soul that he's looking for, the most evil soul, so he can have this power, because they're talking about a missing chapter in Revelations about the angelic wars and how the angels get split because some feel that God loves humans more than them, and there becomes this angelic war that they talk about in Revelations that was left out of the actual Bible that we would read. And he comes to get the most evil soul because then he thinks he has the power. Well, Eric Stoltz comes down early, gets the soul, hides it. Walken comes on Earth, tries to find it, and all the stuff that goes on around it. Eventually we see Lucifer, who's played by Viggo Mortensen. Phenomenal job. Just simple, We're told who he is. We see it. We know it. And the rest is history. And it makes for a powerful, powerful biblical mystery thriller, action, everything. It's one of my favorite films, and of course Christopher Walken, one of my favorite actors. You can't miss it. All right, runner up for 1995, Get Shorty, Gene Hackman once again, Danny DeVito, John Travolta, Rene Russo. It's a really strong cast. Dennis Farina, who we talked about the other day. It's a really, really, really good movie. It has some great comedy to it. It has some good action to it. It has a good story to it. And it has a good background of filmmaking, which is what we're learning, what we're doing. So, it has it all. And it's funny because it's really dialogue heavy, and they were concerned making the movie that it wouldn't translate into film. But of course it does, because you put in great actors and the rest is history, and it ends up being really, really good. You know, Heat, Prophecy, Casino, Get Shorty, and the number one, they're all interchangeable for me. These are movies I can watch over and over again. I really like all of these films. And once again, second Gene Hackman film we're talking about. You know what I mean? And so, you know, I'm a Travolta fan. So you get the people I like. I love Renee Russo. She does a great job in this. So if you haven't seen it, you need to check it out. The sequel is Be Cool. Not nearly as good, but you see this one first, then watch that one. The Rock does a great job in that, and you know, you get Harvey Keitel, and you know, once again, you have some good acting in it, but this one is excellent. Which leads me to my number one. Two of my favorite actors, Crimson Tide, Denzel Washington, Gene Hackman. So, you know, 95 is a great year for my favorite actors. I got Denzel, I got Gene Hackman numerous times, I got De Niro numerous times, I got Chris Walken. I'm doing good in 95. I love it. Crimson Tide is a really strong movie, and I actually went and saw this in the theater. Denzel plays the executive officer on the sub. Gene Hackman is the captain of the Crimson Tide, or the USS Alabama, that is. And it's all done in a sub. You got Viggo Mortensen, you got James Gandolfini. Once again, heavyweight cast, and there basically becomes a mutiny on the sub, and you know it's Denzel versus Hackman. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's a great story. And I remember watching it. And there's this part at the bridge where Denzel is he's taking away Gene Hackman's job as the captain. And they get in an argument. And when it was over, you know, we always talk about playing off each other and matching energies and stuff like that. And I'm like, whoa, we weren't really playing off each other. I wonder what was that about, right? So my dad asked me how the film was, and I was like, it's really, really good, but this scene, and he's like, there's a million different reasons. It could have been directed that way. It could have been blocked that way. I mean, you know, it could have been edited that way. Who knows, you know, what's what. And then like 2 weeks later, I see an interview with Denzel, and Denzel's like, no, they directed it that way, and the reason why is because, A, they wanted to show Gene Hackman out of control, Denzel under control, and then they also wanted to show that Denzel was respecting a superior officer and Gene Hackman as the captain. So you put those two things together and then rewatch the scene, and they absolutely are playing off of each other. It's absolutely there. You don't necessarily have to match screams to match energy, and that's a great scene in seeing that. So when you're watching the movie, check that out. But that's my number one for 1995. A really good, strong movie, Crimson Tide. On the music side, I'm just going to go through a couple CDs really, really quick, and then get to my number one. Ozzy, Osmosis, probably his last great album to me. I mean, I have them all, and there's some good songs here and there. But Perry Mason, I Just Want You, See You on the Other Side, just to name a couple. Really, really strong Ozzy record. A band, Gamma Ray, which is a spin-off from Halloween. One of the original guitar players left and started his own band. He was actually the original singer guitar player of Halloween. Then they hired a singer in Halloween. And then he starts Gamma Ray with a different singer, but then eventually starts singing again. He had taken singing lessons and figured out how to use his voice. And this was the first album where he came back to singing, which is kind of cool. And he even has one song where, or actually two on this album, where Michael Kiske, the Halloween singer that came in and took his spot as vocalist, does a couple tracks on here, which is really neat. It's a good, fun record. Starts with Rebellion in Dreamland, one of my favorite songs. Land of the Free, of course. You know, All of the Damned. You know, Afterlife. It's good heavy metal, power metal, that is, which is kind of more melodic for people to understand that the guitars and the melodies. And so it's kind of like what we would say heavy metal in the U.S., but in Europe, they call it like a power metal. It's just a little faster and it's a little stronger, but this is a really good album. Next up is my runner-up, Van Halen, Balance. Last one with Sammy Hagar, and to me, the last really, really strong album. And to me, this is their best one with Hagar, and I like all the Hagar stuff, and I know I get shit for this all the time, because I love Van Halen. I love all of it. But I actually like the Hagar stuff better than the Roth stuff. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. Actually, I'm not sorry. I like what I like. You guys like what you like. Anyways, I mean, this has the Seventh Seal, I Can't Stop Loving You, Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do, Amsterdam, Aftershock, Not Enough. This is just a really good hard rock Van Halen album. And if you haven't heard it, you need to check it out because it's really strong and I really enjoy it. And once again, this was one of those ones that could have been number one for me, but what's coming up is kind of segueing us into other music going forward. I've been teasing it and it's coming up. So, anyways, Balance, my runner-up for 1995. Okay, so my number one is Sabotage. They actually put out a live record, which was a tribute to Chris Oliva. We talked about his untimely death. I have two versions of it. Here's the U.S., Europe kind of thing, and then here's the Japanese. I got it for the different covers. I'm a big fan, so I collect, and so I get them all. There's no extra tracks. Usually in Japan you get extra tracks, but there's not that. And it's filmed over 80, or recorded over 87, 88, and 90 different concerts they did. And at the end, there's a postscript, which is from a rehearsal in 1990, where you hear Chris say, "Here we go," and it's a little bit of a guitar solo, about a minute and 45, and it's kind of cool to hear his voice and hear him play just clean. But I wanted to point this out because we've been talking about him. But number one on the Sabotage side is a record called Dead Winter Dead. It is a concept album, and concept album, once again, is the whole album is a story. It's about these two kids. It starts in 1990. Well, let me back up. So in the town of Sarajevo, there's like this old medieval square, all these old buildings and stuff like that. And in one of the corners is a church, and on the belfry is this gargoyle. And he's watched for 1,000 years humans come and go, and he's tried to figure out the human emotion, right? Happy, sad, all these different things, and he's still trying to figure out how humans work. And so it's almost like he's telling the story through his eyes. That's how I see it. I don't necessarily think that's how it's supposed to be, but that's how I see it. But anyways, it fast forwards to 1990, and it's right after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And there's this Serb boy named Srđan, and he is ready. He's happy to be alive, and he's ready to, conquer the world now with this freedom and that kind of stuff. And that it fast forwards to 94, and there's the war in Sarajevo going on, right, between the two different sides, and he kind of gets caught up in these militant groups with his friends and fighting. And then on the other side is this girl, Katrina, who is a Muslim girl, and she's kind of, helping sell arms and do things with her side. And because they're on each side, they're kind of hearing and dealing with the same things. Anyways, as the story progresses, there's this old guy who's from Yugoslavia and coming back, and he can't believe like the war-torn area that is there now. And he is ready to be done for the night, and fire starts happening again. And so while everybody's taking shelter, he goes up to this hill and starts playing Mozart on the hill, right in the middle of all the firing and stuff like that. Well, of course, Srđan can hear it, and so can Katrina, and they hear it every night when he's up on that hill playing. Well, as the story goes, all of a sudden, it's Christmas Eve. Srđan's listening to some music from old records or something like that from Christmas time, and they're playing Carol of the Bells, which on the album is called Christmas Eve Sarajevo. And Katrina can hear that as well, and all of a sudden the music stops, or the violin stops or whatever, and they go rushing to the town square to see what's going on, and they arrive at the same time to see the old man dead and the violin broken, etc. And they kind of just look at each other knowing they're on opposite sides. And Srđan says to Katrina, "You know what? I can't do this anymore. Let's just run away." And she sees him in his Serb uniform and sees him for that. And he's like, "No, that's not who I am. Who I am is me, and I'm not this." And he kind of convinces her to go with him. They fall in love, and they run off, and that's basically the end of the story. It's pretty neat, and as concept albums go, it's as good as they get. But unbeknownst to Sabotage, this song, Christmas Eve, Sarajevo, which is the second to the last here, becomes a hit, right? And all of a sudden, they start to realize maybe we can do a side project of Christmas music. And here stems Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which we all know we've seen in car commercials, we've heard the music during Christmas time, and this is the evolution now of Sabotage into Trans-Siberian Orchestra, right? Now, Sabotage will do a couple more albums, but really TSO is going to be the band that really takes off for them, and it was based off of this song on this album. They end up doing a Christmas album, and it takes off, and that's who they become. And you know, it's great if you see them live. I've seen them several times through the Christmas stuff and other stuff, but you know, they'll still play some of those Sabotage songs, and they'll still play stuff from this and stuff because it kind of fits into the orchestra sound and feel. But you know, I've been teasing it for a while, but the evolution of Sabotage, especially after Chris was killed, became Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and this was the record that kind of stemmed that. So you know, this is, you know, number one, a really great record, great concept, great story, you know, great music, the whole 9 yards. But then it also triggers into something bigger and better for them, at least. For me, I'd rather listen to Sabotage, but, you know, at least we get something. So, anyways, one other quick note. A couple years ago, there's a big 2-stage festival called Wacken in Germany, and it was the first time Sabotage had played live in a few years, and they actually had Trans-Siberian on one stage and Sabotage on the other stage and playing back and forth. And you can go on YouTube and check this out, and it's pretty incredible. I don't think anybody's ever done anything like that, but that's what you get when you get such great musicians and artists, and it's pretty cool. So I wanted to pass that on. Anyways, that is my 1995 Sabotage's Dead Winter Dead, and then of course the classic Crimson Tide. All right, so we'll see you tomorrow, 1996. We're moving right along. Leave the comments. Curious what you guys like, don't like, what I've missed. Hit the like button, the subscribe, do all the things I ask you to do every day. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you tomorrow.